Prospect House Media.
And now, prepare yourself for the only weekly podcast you won't want to miss. Welcome to the Ameritocracy Show with Troy Edgar, live from our studios in Los Angeles and Washington, D.C.
Hey everybody, I am Troy Edgar and welcome to the Ameritocracy Show. Thank you for tuning in and checking it out. It is greatly appreciated. This podcast examines the conditions for personal and economic growth and opportunity across America. This week, world-renowned artist Olga Krimon sits down with me in Redondo Beach, California, to talk about her transition from a successful corporate career to an award-winning artist. She provides an inspiring story of choosing the harder path, which is one of calculated risk, investing in yourself, and building the confidence required to succeed during a significant career change. Olga Krimon has achieved the American dream. She is born in Odessa, Ukraine, and lived in Russia until she was 17. She came to the U.S. as an exchange student and got her bachelor's degree from Davidson College in North Carolina and her MBA from the Marshall School of Business at the University of Southern California. I met Olga in 2010 when she joined my consulting company and led a complex project at DirecTV. We had both worked at PricewaterhouseCoopers in 1990s and early 2000s. She had told me from the beginning she was balancing dual careers as her art was beginning to take off. In 2011, one of her paintings won a prestigious award at an international portrait competition, and she began to be recognized by the art community as someone to watch. In 2017, after winning many competitions over the previous 6 years, she won the prestigious First Place Award in a competition with the Portrait Society of America. And after that, she dedicated herself full-time to her art. Olga is currently on display in many galleries, including Reinhardt Fine Art in Charleston, South Carolina, the Whitehorn Gallery in Ireland, and the Hancock Gallery in England. I absolutely love her art, and I encourage everyone to go to my website at troyedgar.com, where I have posted her information. Also, check out the show's social media to see behind the scenes with me at her studio, where the magic happens. I hope you enjoy it. Good morning, Olga. It's so good to see you. How are you doing?
Nice to see you, Troy. Long time.
It's been a while. We, Olga and I have known each other since about 2010. Yeah. So I'm very honored to have you on the show today. So again, thank you.
Thank you.
For our listeners, we have Olga Krimon today, world-renowned artist. An unbelievable story. I think everybody will find this super inspirational, and I want to talk a little bit about, world-renowned meaning just even recently, last week, had showing in London, and it also has been recognized multiple times by the Portrait Society of America, placing, in the top 2 or 3 and even a 4th place there. But just unbelievable amount of acclamation and accreditations that had taken place. So I'm super excited to have you on the show today. What I wanted to do a little bit is in the open, we talk a little bit, I give an overview of your background, but I think it would be interesting for the listeners to be able to kind of get an idea to get to know you a little bit better. And just to kind of set this up, coming in, you've come in from Ukraine, Russia into America, great corporate story, and then ends up going into becoming this world-renowned artist. So, Olga, if you could fill in the blanks for us, that'd be great.
Sure. So I was born in Ukraine, and then my family moved to Russia, but we had still family in Ukraine. So it was kind of going back and forth when it was still one and the same country, actually, the Soviet Union. My interest in art started very early. My first solo exhibition was in the kindergarten, actually.
Wow.
So, yeah, my first, set of brushes, my first set of watercolors, obviously my family played a huge role in this, and they've always been very supportive. This is at the time when you couldn't just walk into the store and get the supplies. You had to, find everything and know people to find stuff. And I'm really fortunate to have a very supporting family. Growing up in Russia and Ukraine, the best museums in the world, and going there all the time. And, I come from the city where fashion was from, etc. So it's it all kind of fueled that love. And then we have a very sort of structured, formal art education there. So I finished an art school, which is a traditional sort of classical atelier approach school in Russia. So that's where I came from. But I went on to study other things. I was very interested in many other things. I mean, I loved math. I loved languages so much that I actually went on to study philology in Odessa State University in Ukraine. And while there, I was actually sent to Moscow to compete in an English competition. And as a winner, I got a chance to come to the States for a one-year exchange program. And that's how I ended up in Davidson College, North Carolina. And it was a wonderful place. I learned so much, and I learned how to speak English every day, all day. And that was, that alone was hard enough. And then I got full scholarship from Davidson, which was very fortunate that I could finish it. And, in the meantime, the Soviet Union collapsed, and my family decided to move here. I did get a chance to go back to Moscow for a couple of years to work, but other than that, my life became the life in the U.S. It was not a planned thing, but this is something that I'm very fortunate. I love all the countries that I lived in, and I love having the opportunity to do what I do here. So that's kind of in a nutshell. I went, but it's a very long journey, how I came back to art. I mean, I always did it for myself. I just never believed, or at least at the beginning, I did not think that anything with art is something that people can do. I wanted to be a normal person, have a normal job, afford everything. And I went on to a successful corporate career, consulting career, PricewaterhouseCoopers, worked for my clients, and then for you, Troy, there's a different story, TV, etc. And then it was in 2011 is when I started to get back very, very seriously in art, and that's kind of probably a conversation on its own. And then by 2017, I kind of, during that time, I had that dual life of a corporate person and an artist, truly. And in 2017, I became a full-time artist. I made that decision, and I've been in this full-time, full swing ever since.
Yeah, Olga, your story is fascinating. Like you said, we intercepted about 2010. And, what's interesting is I remember having discussions with you about a lot of different stuff. And, you had mentioned in passing art, and I remember when you made the final decision in 2017, but, you were actually putting time in and actually winning stuff and building up your credentials and your viability, not only within the Los Angeles area, around the United States and overseas. And, as you were kind of going through that process, I think you get to a certain point, where you made that move. And I think, for all the listeners, I think why the story is so fascinating is, can you imagine somebody that comes to the U.S., earns it on her merit, on a scholarship, gets here, accomplishes things here, and then kind of goes out. You end up looking around and saying, hey, I think I can live here. You don't have a lot, like you said, going on back at home that was really viable at that point. Your whole family comes here, and you just kind of keep climbing up. And, what I always find fascinating with your story is like at any point of your accomplishments, you could have been good. I mean, you know, especially I know you a lot from your corporate consulting side. And yeah, even today, we always joke. I joke with you. It's like today you could wake up and say, you know, art was a good idea. It was a fun experience, and you could be tremendously successful. And that has got to give you a lot of confidence. But I'm sure back in the day when you decided, hey, look, I'm going to move from this profession. I talk to people. It's like it's time to do free solo. I mean, it's not like you had a safety net here. If this didn't work out, it was you really every move you've made, you were very brave and kind of moved into it. And I think that so we're going to explore a little bit of the process that you had and the decision processes that you go through, and kind of what makes you feel like you are ready to kind of move on. One last question about your story was, you know, when you came for a school at Davidson, I believe it's in North Carolina, and probably a pretty different experience after, coming over here. Were you here with your family or by yourself at that point?
I was by myself. I was on that exchange program. It was a very different thing. I learned how to smile all day too. Like my face was. I was joking before. My face was, hurting from smiling so much. I was not used to walking around down the campus and just doing that. But it was a great, introduction into America. People are so nice. They talk a bit slower so that you understand better. It was a very interesting thing, and culturally, it was a very big shock. My first grocery store here was a big shock. Let's put it that way.
Well, your example of being into art, today you can go down to Michael's and get everything you need in one trip for art. That's a rookie like me, you probably go to a real art place.
I don't go there, yeah.
But back at some point, and it hasn't always been like that. Getting stuff for whatever profession. I'm a guitar player. To be able to go into a guitar center and have every single thing you would ever want in one place versus your local music store or going to a bunch of different places. So
we're spoiled, but at the same time, remembering that you are valuing things so much more, probably. Yeah, but it's incredible.
So a question for you, Olga, before we get into some of the content of details of some of the lessons that were out there, talk a little bit about your art career. I mean, it's because to me it's fascinating that, you've had a couple very interesting points where you kind of got to an inflection point and said, hey, look, I'm decent. I think I can do good at this. You and I talked before. Sometimes the inspiration that you get is from your family. Like somebody sees you doing art at your house, or the local school sees something, sends a note home to your parents. Hey, Olga's pretty talented. But, here you are, living in Los Angeles. You've got a lot of going on. So if you wouldn't mind just sharing with the listeners a little bit, and I'll put in the show notes some of the different exhibits that are going on all over the place. But, talk a little bit about your art and, what's some of the activity that you're focused on today?
Oh, got you. So I am a representational artist. So that means realism. I'm very interested in figurative pieces primarily. So, for commissions, I obviously do portraits, but when I say figurative, it's more of using a figure, using the model in a way to express something. So she's part of that composition. Hopefully the listeners would be able to see my works to actually see what I'm looking for, and maybe this is why I'm an artist, because it's much easier for me to say something visually than to express it in words. Maybe that's why we paint, But, and I primarily work in oils, although I love charcoal and, watercolor and everything else. But my gallery work is 99.9% is oils on Belgian linen. I work I've worked with many galleries. I am now focused on 3 galleries. Reinhardt Fine Art in South Carolina is my main gallery. I've been with them since the very beginning, and just amazing people to work with. And I work with Whitethorn Gallery in Ireland and the Hancock Gallery in England. So it's I work in, I have group shows, I have solo shows, but the work in these three galleries is, it's continuous representation. So if you walk in, if you're in Charleston, especially, do come in. It's in a great location downtown. I am right now, in that figurative space, I'm very interested in the way that the figure merges into, in my case right now, the water. Like I'm right now on this, what I call weightless series, like a series of works where the water and the skin come together. And that gives me, an ability to give that, that type of realism, in the figure, but then I can abstract the water around it. So, maybe you can look at that and, visualize what I'm talking about. But that's, I've been obsessed. I've been putting people in the pools and, researching every bit of information I can find to see how that merge is happening. There's a lot of logical thinking and a lot of research that comes with this. And in a sense, it's still project management. You're managing, this idea becomes a project, and that project becomes, paintings, and I just can't stop.
So I got a question, Olga. So, kind of comparing art to business, right? Art, the end product is so precise. Where in business, I might go to 50 meetings in a week, and some of them were good. Some of them were okay. Some of them were unbelievable. And at the end, I hope more of them were better than not. But, my body of work would be judged on my contribution over that week of things. You put your time and effort into a painting, and at the end of that painting, it's either what you hoped it would be, and then you got to kind of let it go. It's like you also can't spend forever doing the painting. And so, like you said, I could see where the project management part comes into it. But, that it's interesting is I think, and maybe I'm off on this, but it seems like an art is more of a very precise shot at the end, because whatever you do has to finish exactly the way it needed to finish. You didn't get like 20 or 50 chances over the week, to get it, and people judge. So how is that, that final judgment? It's got to be a tough market too, because, once it's done, you're not looking back. You got to move to the next thing.
That's a very loaded question, because actually what you see is not everything that is being created, right? So in your analogy with maybe those meetings, you will have those countless hours of working on something. Just 2 weeks ago, I worked on a painting for 5 days, and I just wiped it all off. And and here's the difference between this work and the work of, let's say, of a corporate, maybe not a consultant, but a corporate person. You're still paid for that. Here, you're spending 5 days, you wipe it off, your 5 days are gone. Wow. So there's a risk you take, but then through that, some very interesting things can happen as well. But I would say, to me, painting is a much more honest work, in a way that this is who I am, and this is what I'm capable of doing. And in a corporate job, it's so easy for some people to maybe be not as much of a contribution, or, there's always that group sort of work, right? A project is...
Yeah. You can hide behind a group.
Exactly. Not, but I've seen it, right?
Well, we both have MBAs, so you'd be in MBA classes, one or two people.
Carried somebody for a long time.
We've all had that experience through there.
But here, you are who you are. I mean, yes, you work with the galleries, you work with the models, you work with the framers, etc. But that is, after the fact. The idea is truly yours. You can be as skilled as, you can be a very skilled artist, but with nothing to say. And then you can't really get there either. Or you can be somebody whose skill needs to be, like, it's all out, right there. And maybe not for everybody to, take it apart this way. But if you're in this business, I mean, you're a musician, if you hear the music, you understand what that person is capable of, much more so than I can. But I can do that, even through just looking at somebody's brush strokes, or the way they handle the anatomy, or, there's so many aspects to, or how they handle the edges of within their work. So it's a much more, to me, it's a much more honest thing. But with that comes such a risk. You nailed it.
Part of what we try to do in the show is we are trying to look at the process of what makes things happen, either personally, professionally, or in the economy. And I just kind of want to go with this art thing a little bit further, if you wouldn't mind, is that people that get ready to do something, and we're going to talk about your move into art, but it could be anything that they want to get into. It could have been in starting this podcast, right? It's like in your mind, you get a view of what you think you want to paint, and it gets into your mind so much that you aren't able to start because you're like, oh my God, I can never figure this out. And I think people in business do that a lot. People that look at all the companies I've started and all the things, and they go, Troy, how could you do this? And I've had this idea for 15 years. It's like, well, that's the problem. You've had the idea, and you got to start and fail, and after a week, wipe it off. But if you don't ever start, you'll never do it. And so I'm just kind of curious, like from an artist perspective, and applying it to people in business, can you, what is the balance of overthinking it? Because you also don't want to just waste a canvas or your time, so you do need to kind of think through it. But how do you trade off like the investment up front and then, hey, it's good enough, I'll get it, but I got to start it. If I never start it won't be something.
Oh, you kind of just said it. Yeah. I kind of had to redefine what success is. Maybe, as we're, mundane as that sounds, but you have, I might have failed on that painting, but this is what I got out of it. That this is what I learned. There are certain things, if I try, like right now, I'm trying to apply like silver leafing and gold leafing into it, and it's a time investment. It's money, and it's a real, genuine gold, etc. And I might fail, but if I don't, then But with every application, I learn something, and I get better, and I will get better, and I will get better. I just have to allow myself to be down. I don't know how else to answer that question. But in terms of, for those who want to do something and don't, there's always a way. There's always time. There's always, if you really, really want it badly, you will find the time. You will cut TV shows and whatever you need.
Yeah. Hey, previous interviews that I've looked at that you've been a part of, you talked about picking the harder path, and it's kind of interesting when you pick harder path, like I use the example of you got to the U.S., you got a degree, you could have done anything. Did this corporate world, you got an MBA. So at that point, you're picking a hard path, but you honestly could have stopped there, but you picked a harder path. You went, hey, you know what, the art thing, I'm going to keep doing that. And I'm just curious, like when you decide that you're going to pick that, what is it inside of you that kind of pushes you to want to do that? Or, do you think that that's something that's like, I know the answer to this because you and I've talked, is like, hey, I never woke up in the morning as a young kid and said, I want to be an artist. But something started ticking, and then something got you to a point in 2011 when you're like, hey, I'm going to start in parallel doing some stuff. So talk about picking the harder path.
That was a very, very long path to it, like we were talking. I found I never meant to do it. If anything, I was actually trying to get away from it. I was trying so hard to be normal, and I was trying, like, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to go to the art school. I'm going to go to get my MBA. Like, I was almost always pushing it away. Like, this cannot happen. But I found, and it took me a while to recognize it, like years to recognize it, but every time that I was down, or every time I was stressed, or every time I literally had to doodle. It's almost like my fingers, you know how some people, peel off the labels from like beer cans or something? Like I had to do this. And it was a way, to have therapy of sorts. So that's how eventually I started to notice that something was happening. Like I was constantly doing it for myself. I was constantly going to museums. Like I continued to perfect it, even though I was not in that space. And then it's ironic, but it's when I already had my first child is when I got into it seriously, full swing. And part of it, I think part of it was that I needed to be in my own space. Like I needed to survive as an individual, and I needed to, not be a caretaker all the time. And I just needed to get into my world where nobody else existed. And art gave me that. And I was very seriously, taking classes. I talked about my art school, but I mean, I was studying like crazy in Los Angeles. I was taking workshops and classes from two very known artists in Los Angeles. So I'm very, talking about having the right people at the right time, right? And slowly, gradually, I found that I can't, I have to do it. Like these ideas, they were just in my head and they were pushing. Like I couldn't, it's almost like that second, that voice in your head, like you're going crazy. And if I don't push it out of me, like it's almost like it has to get out. And if it doesn't get out, I'm actually not a good person to be with. I become very sort of edgy and so forth. So it took me a long time to realize that the only way for me to be happy, and I was trying to find happiness. I was saying I loved my jobs. I had the best, bosses, and I had, I'm still very much in touch with everybody, but I just could not find that true happiness. And then also, to be honest, I just wanted something. I had this, and maybe again with the kids, like I just wanted something to stay there when I'm gone. Like, I don't know, it sounds pathetic, but it's true. Like I needed, when I'm not here, I need something of me to continue. And I was, even on that huge project we did for, let's say, DirecTV, that dashboard, 3-4 years is gone. And I was like, but that's my work. I invested in this.
Right.
I needed something to be meaningful, and I could not find it. And I found it in this. And it's funny, like I came back full circle into the art where I felt like I belonged, but I just tried to get away and I couldn't. It's like Sopranos. It just took me back in,
Yes. Yeah.
Like I can get away. So.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, kind of on the theme of building confidence. So you talk about going and getting classes done, and again, the credentialing process of anything, right? So you get your undergrad degree, you go on and get your MBA, your
PMP.
And then your PMP.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and so you're all your corporate bona fides, and then you end up, it's interesting is like when people go and they look at your website and they see stuff, or they go onto Instagram. I got to be honest, you're my favorite one to follow because all of your stuff is just awesome. You're all, every time you have a new piece, you release it up there. And I do see, because you're very exploratory, you start painting on metal, you start doing all this different stuff. But it's interesting is I think building confidence and getting credentialed in the art world, it seems like that is kind of a big thing. And I'll just say like the awards that substantiate you, everybody can draw and go get art stuff and try to do it. And sometimes they just have a little bit of natural talent, go, I got it. But that process of entering into like the Portrait Society of America or those competitions or showing in a gallery, those become, again, credentials for your work. And then as that goes, more followers go. And then there's so many people, and it's such a tight, not organization, but industry, is that your competition, just to put it in business terms, is seeing all this too. And so everybody, is trying to do the best they can, but credentials mean something there. Do you think that you ever get to a point where it doesn't mean as much, where it, like in commercial art, Kincaid, all of these different types of things that are out there that are like in a different realm than the type of art that you focus on? I would assume possibly through that process that maybe Thomas Kincaid went through, art competitions, but it just seems so commercial that I'm just not sure. Yours seems raw, like you're going from level to level and earning your way up through a credentialed process. Is that how it works in the art industry?
Yeah, for one, I'm not a fan of Kincaid, but I felt it's actually was more so for me that I was doing it. I needed to get my sort of self-esteem, and that's what gave me that feeling that I can do it early on, because my first Portrait Society award was in 2011. And that was a huge booster, right? And it's only, that organization did a lot for me, like over the years. So I feel like without them, I would probably, maybe it would take me much longer to make that jump. So I feel like it wasn't even for my galleries and for my collectors. I felt like I needed that. I slowed down in terms of, I'm very selective now as to, what I submit to, and it's pretty much just Portrait Society at this time. But I felt that need, yeah. But there's always something out there. And in terms of, you kind of mentioned something about education and art and education. I always felt, and this is probably what in a corporate, because I had at some point I managed quite a large team of project managers. I can create or teach a project manager to become a good project manager in a month to start start their own projects. I'm not saying they're going to have a huge Teradata upgrade project, but they can start. It takes much longer to become an artist. And I'm talking about not just entering the world of it, but just developing the skill. Like, what is it saying? You need 10,000 hours. I think you need way more than 10,000 hours. So it's sort of, if you're in it, I just felt like this is the place where the skill is acquired over thousands of hours versus something else can be done for more money. So if you're in this, for money, you're in the wrong industry, you
Right.
know. There are much easier ways to succeed in that. But if you want to do that, you need to it's self-education most of all, I think.
Good. Last question I have. When you get ready, you make that move that you've made, and maybe this is put yourself in the position of many people that want to take risks and go out and do, and then they plunge. They do what they set out to do. There's a period after you do it where you kind of sit back and you think, oh man, did I make the right choice? And I'll just call this keeping the confidence. And and again, whether you're an artist, you're an entrepreneur, whether you're doing anything that is asking you to kind of quote go all in, you sit back. You said something to me before that I wanted to explore a little bit. And you said, what are you prepared to lose? And so to talk about that, because you got to have the confidence to go into something, but you got to be willing to lose stuff too. How do you balance that?
Yeah, and when I said that, it also be prepared to fail probably as well, but I meant what is the toll that it's going to take on you and on your loved ones? What is it going to do to your family? You might, are you prepared to go as far as a divorce sometimes? It's sort of your kids might see you less. There's a certain thing, like for everybody, it's a different thing. I mean, are you prepared to take a financial cut? But with all that, again, consider that as a long-term project. Did you prepare yourself financially? I've been sort of preparing for a long time. I mean, that's why also I did the projects I was doing. You have to have a certain cushion. You have to have your family on board and so forth. I mean, everybody has their own things to lose. But if you don't sacrifice, these big jumps are not going to happen. It's very hard, especially when you become so comfortable. With a corporate job, that's a very comfortable paycheck every 2 weeks. And it's a great group of people I worked with. They're still some of my favorite people. It's very hard to cut, But at the same time, it's also, I think personally that having that cushion of not only financial, but having that connection to people who you can have. Like I always knew that, like you were saying, I always knew if something fails, I can come back to you and I can ask for projects, or I can go back to my VP. So wonderful. She's a great person, and I've had those opportunities. So she was actually asking me to come back part-time, etc. So having that sort of, I'm not going to fail because no matter what, my kids will be taken care of because I have the skills beyond this. I always have that confidence. So I wasn't just jumping. I was it was a calculated jump.
Yeah, I love that. Olga, we're just about wrapping up. Anything else, any other topics you would like to address the listeners, or anything else that you would like to share from your perspective?
I would say I don't encourage anybody to jump to anything. Okay, so don't jump on an emotion. Like never do anything just because you had the idea and you jump. You have that emotion. It takes a long time to kind of test the grounds. You can have a portfolio type of a job where you're doing something part-time and doing this part-time. There's so many other ways of trying to get in. I want to also maybe demystify the artistic career. I mean, you're not just there when, something hits you, and it's a job, and a lot of it is not a job at the easel. You have to do so much packing, framing, shipping, talking to galleries. There's so much logistics. So, know what you're getting into, because you might be very, heartbroken to see what it actually, how much physical labor even is implied. So maybe that, and I don't think anybody should jump unless this is something that in your gut, like you just can't not do it, because of, how much is involved. So probably, it's probably that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, as we wrap up, Olga, the part I've been looking forward to is to go take a look at the actual studio and get out there and check this out. Yeah, so let's do that, huh?
Let's do that.
So, hey, thank you so much for coming on this week. I wish you the best of luck, and it's always great to see you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Same here.
Thanks again for joining me today on the Ameritocracy Show. Be sure to follow me on social media and our website at troyedgar.com, where you can get more information and sign up for my weekly email. I hope you have a great week.